Living in a place like Australia, being a First Nations person, I'm very aware of how much story is embedded in place. All our countries here are so beautiful and so rich with story, and all of them have had strangeness and violence brought to them in recent years. Working with poetry, you can create these really bodily responses to story and to place and to who we are as people. Poetry is this way of holding those two things together, to talk about the beauty and the strength, and to also talk about the pain and the hardship.
Narragan. When I break through the confines of English, I'm free. All the best things I write are straining at the edges of the coloniser's language.
As a Wiradjuri person who is living off-country, living on beautiful Gadigal land, I am very aware of what it is to work with my own language, which isn't from here but is from here, and wanting to be respectful of also the languages of Gadigal land or of any place where I am living or working. I want to be really deliberate about bringing back our first languages into that public discourse, and if I'm working with place, I have to be thoughtful about what it is to work with English, which is this very imposed, clunky colonial language, when there is a language that is so much more beautiful and more relevant.
Kalyakor Bidikart, Wordakura Yiyamila, Budawan, in War Nija Buja, Reflection, Cutting.
I have a work currently in Western Australia on beautiful Noongar country and working with some of their custodians and language speakers. It responds to the waterways there at the Swan River, which has had this really strange history. It's a freshwater river that in the colonial period, the mouth was created by exploding the gap between the ocean and the river, thereby making it a saltwater estuary and completely changing what that river has been for millennia.
Nyiring current Balajan il, but Kadajan Yalakich, il Kalyakor of Munyong Cape Courage.
And also wanted to respond to the bridge itself, this built structure, which is made of the most beautiful jarrah trees that would have known so many Noongar stories from before the European settlement of that place that were cut down, brought up to the river and placed there. So I wanted to think about the way that we take country for granted and what country is saying if only we have the ways to listen to it. And so part of that process was also to translate what I wrote in English into Noongar, which was done by Auntie Sandra Harben. And I hope the land feels good about hearing the return of language being spoken in that way, in that place.
Nija Wangani Nyining, Bilia Buja Yiwur.
As someone who lives in a city, I'm constantly struck by this sort of false dichotomy that we think of as country being somewhere else and the city being not country. I mean, these buildings, they're so recent, they're so young, they're these little scratches on the surface of this ancient, beautiful place. And that's what I'm thinking at constantly. The First Nations memory, the place memory, the colonial, the settler, like how these stories collide. I had a work at Carriage Works for the No Show exhibition, and that work came about by trying to research Carriage Works. I really struggled to find any history from before the trains. And everyone loves the trains, but there is more to place than the last 100 years.
Train and carriage, all precious relic to preserve and enshrine atop. Just dirt, just stone, just sand unknown.
The work was a poem that was covered in soil that's from the site, from underneath the building, so that it sort of looked like the poem was coming up from the earth itself, like it was this declaration coming from the land.
Land to give and trade to one, Chisholm.
The work was called £100,000 in reference to the £100,000 that James Chisholm was paid by the New South Wales government in 1880 to buy back the land that they had just given to him a few decades earlier for free. And £100,000 in today's currency is somewhere around the $18 million mark. Just that crazy discrepancy that you have there of that stolen wealth, that if that had gone to the First Nations Gadigal community of this place, we would have had a completely different history of Sydney. Challenging histories, or the ways that we think about histories, can be hard for some people. I think if you've never thought about the built world as being sort of this intervention and a violent intervention, once that's sort of revealed or discussed, that can be something that is hard to take on. I'm often trying to bring the audience to that place of complexity with me, to not take for granted the built environment or the natural environment, but to think about the way that this place has always been shaped by Indigenous hands and always will be.